The restaurant sparkled with twinkling lights and silver tinsel, but Emma Chen sat alone at the corner table, watching the doorway with diminishing hope. 20 minutes had become 30, then 45. Her phone remained silent. No apologetic text, no rushed explanation, just the hollow certainty that he wasn't coming. Around her, couples laughed over candle-lit dinners while Christmas carols drifted through the air, each note a reminder of her solitude. She'd worn her nicest dress, the emerald one her sister said made her eyes shine. She'd arrived early, practiced conversation starters, even rehearsed how to laugh naturally at his jokes. But none of it mattered now. The waiter approached for the third time with sympathetic eyes, and Emma finally accepted what her heart had been whispering. She'd been stood up on Christmas Eve. Emma stared at the melting ice in her water glass, fighting the burning sensation behind her eyes. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of strangers celebrating their perfect holiday romances. Her best friend Madison had set up this blind date with her cousin's co-worker, promising he was genuinely nice and totally ready for something real. Emma had been skeptical at 32. She'd learned that blind dates rarely delivered on their promises, but Madison's enthusiasm had been infectious. Besides, spending Christmas Eve alone in her apartment, watching other people's happiness scroll past on social media, seemed infinitely worse than taking a chance. Now she wasn't so sure. She reached for her purse, ready to leave this humiliation behind, when a small voice pierced through her fog of disappointment. "Excuse me, miss." Emma looked up to find a little girl standing beside her table, no more than 7 years old, with dark curls escaping from beneath a knit beanie decorated with snowflakes. Her brown eyes were serious, assessing, as if she were making a very important decision. Behind her stood a man in his mid-30s, tall and slightly disheveled, holding a worn backpack and looking thoroughly exhausted. "My daddy and I were wondering," the girl continued, her small hand resting on the edge of Emma's table, "if maybe we could sit with you. All the other tables are full, and Daddy says we should ask politely before assuming." Emma glanced around the restaurant. The little girl wasn't wrong. Every table was occupied with holiday diners. But something in the child's expression went beyond simply needing a seat. There was a hopefulness there, a fragile kind of brightness that reminded Emma of Christmas lights threatening to go out. "Of course," Emma heard herself say, gesturing to the empty chairs. "Please join me." The little girl's face transformed with a smile that could have powered the entire restaurant's decorations. "Daddy, she said yes." The man approached, and Emma noticed the shadows under his eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders that spoke of long days and longer nights. But when he looked at his daughter, his whole face softened. "Thank you so much," he said, his voice rough with genuine gratitude. "I'm Marcus, and this is my daughter Zoe. We really appreciate this." As they settled into their chairs, Emma realized she was grateful too. Grateful, not to sit alone with her disappointment, grateful for the distraction from her own bruised ego. Zoe immediately began chattering about the decorations, pointing out her favorite ornaments on the massive Christmas tree near the entrance. "I like the silver angel best," Zoe announced, "because angels watch over people. Daddy says Mommy is an angel now watching over us." The words came out matter of fact, without the weight they carried, but Emma saw Marcus flinch slightly, his jaw tightening. "That's beautiful," Emma said softly, understanding flooding through her. This wasn't just a crowded restaurant situation. This was a father and daughter navigating their first Christmas without someone who should have been there. Marcus gave her a grateful look before redirecting the conversation. "Were you waiting for someone? We don't want to intrude if—" "No," Emma said quickly, then more honestly. "I mean, I was, but he's not coming. So I'm glad for the company." Zoe's eyebrows drew together in an adorable scowl. "He didn't come. On Christmas Eve? That's the rudest thing I ever heard." Despite everything, Emma laughed, a real laugh that surprised her with its lightness. "You know what? You're absolutely right. It is pretty rude. You're much too pretty to be stood up." Zoe continued with the unfiltered honesty of children. "You look like a princess. Doesn't she look like a princess, Daddy? Marcus's cheeks reddened slightly, but he smiled. She does indeed. That guy clearly doesn't know what he's missing. The waiter returned, and what had started as Emma's disaster of an evening transformed into something unexpected. They ordered food family style, sharing plates of pasta and warm bread, hot chocolate for Zoe, and coffee for the adults. Marcus explained that they'd been driving for hours, trying to make it to his sister's house upstate for Christmas. But car trouble had stranded them in the city. The mechanic says it won't be ready until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest, Marcus said, dragging a hand through his dark hair. All the hotels are booked solid, and I was running out of options when Zoe spotted this place and said she was starving. She gets hangry, Zoe interjected seriously. That means hungry angry. Daddy taught me that word. Emma found herself sharing too, about her work as a children's book illustrator, about how she'd moved to the city 5 years ago, chasing dreams that felt both closer and farther away than ever. She told them about her disaster date without meaning to, and somehow, with Zoe's indignant reactions and Marcus's wry comments, the whole thing became funny rather than pathetic. You know what I think? Zoe said, pointing a breadstick at Emma like a tiny professor making an important point. I think maybe that man didn't show up because you were supposed to have dinner with us instead, like it was meant to be. The simple certainty in her voice made Emma's throat tight. Maybe you're right. As dinner progressed, Emma learned that Marcus was a high school teacher, that he'd been raising Zoe alone for 2 years since his wife Sarah died in a car accident. She heard it in the careful way he talked about before and after, in how Zoe mentioned Mommy with the casualness of someone who'd learned to carry grief, like a familiar backpack. This is our first Christmas doing something different, Marcus admitted quietly, while Zoe was distracted by the dessert menu. Every year before we'd go to Sarah's parents' house, but this year felt too hard, too full of ghosts. My sister suggested we come to her place, try to make new memories. I just didn't expect the universe to make it quite so complicated. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, Emma agreed, thinking of her own evening's trajectory. When dessert arrived, towering chocolate cake that Zoe declared, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Emma made a decision that surprised even herself. I have a guest room, she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. It's not fancy, but it's clean and warm, and you're welcome to stay there tonight. Both of you! I know this is completely crazy and we just met, but... Yes, Zoe shouted, then immediately covered her mouth with both hands, eyes wide. Marcus looked stunned. We couldn't possibly impose like that. You've already been so kind. You wouldn't be imposing, Emma said, and realized she meant it completely. Honestly, going home alone tonight to an empty apartment sounds pretty terrible. And tomorrow is Christmas. No one should spend Christmas stranded and stressed. She pulled out her phone, opening it to her social media profiles, her website, her professional portfolio. Look, I'm a real person, not an axe murderer. I have references and everything. Marcus laughed, the sound warming the space between them. I'm not worried about you being dangerous. I'm just overwhelmed by the generosity. He looked at Zoe's pleading face, then back at Emma. Are you sure? Completely sure. The walk to Emma's apartment took 20 minutes through streets transformed by Christmas lights and fresh snow that had begun falling while they ate. Zoe held both their hands, swinging between them, singing Jingle Bells, with creative new lyrics about chocolate, cake and snowflake beanies. Marcus and Emma exchanged smiles over her head, and something shifted in Emma's chest, loosening of the tight knot that had formed when she'd realized she'd been stood up. Her apartment was modest but cozy, filled with her artwork and warm blankets and the kind of comfortable chaos that comes from actually living in a space. Zoe's eyes went wide at the framed illustrations covering the walls. You made all these? She breathed, moving from picture to picture with reverent hands clasped behind her back. They're magic. Thank you, Emma said, genuinely touched. That's the best compliment an artist can get. She showed them to the guest room, dug out fresh towels and an extra toothbrush, and found one of her oversized college sweatshirts for Zoe to sleep in. When she returned to the living room, Marcus was standing at her bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines, with the careful attention of someone who truly loved books. "Thank you," he said again, turning to face her. "I don't just mean for the room. I mean for tonight, for making what could have been awful into something Zoe will remember as an adventure, for seeing us when you could have just as easily said no." "You saved my evening too," Emma replied honestly. "I was sitting in that restaurant feeling sorry for myself, convinced that being alone meant being lonely. But you and Zoe reminded me that the best connections are the ones you don't see coming." They talked for another hour after Zoe fell asleep, sharing the kind of honest, vulnerable conversation that usually takes months to reach, but sometimes happens in a single night when circumstances align. Marcus talked about the guilt he carried, wondering if he was doing enough for Zoe, if he could ever fill the void Sarah's death had left. Emma shared her fears about being 32 and single, about wondering if choosing her career meant choosing solitude. "You know what I think your problem is?" Marcus said, and Emma braced herself for criticism. Instead, he smiled gently. "You've been looking for someone who fits into your life perfectly, like a puzzle piece. But maybe the right person is someone who makes you want to reshape the whole puzzle." The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Christmas morning arrived with weak sunlight and the smell of coffee. Emma woke to find Zoe already awake, perched on her couch with a sketchbook Emma had left out, drawing with intense concentration. "I'm making you a picture," Zoe announced, "as a thank you present." The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands, surrounded by stars and hearts. Above them, Zoe had carefully written, "The best Christmas surprise." Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking more rested than the night before, and his smile when he saw Emma made her heart skip in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. They made breakfast together, pancakes that Zoe insisted should be shaped like Christmas trees, and talked about everything and nothing. The mechanic called mid-morning to say the car would be ready by evening. The news should have felt like an ending, but instead, it felt like the beginning of something neither Emma nor Marcus wanted to name yet, but both recognized. "Come with us," Marcus said suddenly as they were cleaning up breakfast. "To my sister's house. She'd love to meet you, and honestly, I'm not ready to say goodbye yet." Emma thought about her original plan, a quiet day alone with a book and takeout. Then she looked at Zoe's hopeful face, at Marcus's tentative smile, and made her choice. "I'd love to." The drive upstate was filled with Zoe's endless chatter, roadside sing-alongs, and the comfortable silence of people who'd found something unexpected and precious. Marcus's sister welcomed Emma like family, asking no questions but understanding everything. That night, as Emma sat around a table full of strangers who'd become friends, she thought about the blind date she'd dreaded, the rejection she'd endured, and the chance encounter that had changed everything. Sometimes life's biggest disappointments were actually doorways to something better. 3 months later, Emma would illustrate a children's book about a girl who learns that Christmas magic comes from kindness. A year after that, Marcus would propose with Zoe's enthusiastic approval. But in that moment, surrounded by laughter and love she'd never expected, Emma simply felt grateful that she'd been rejected on a Christmas blind date, and that a little girl had walked over to ask if they could join her, because sometimes the family you're meant to find finds you first.